welcome to my channel. My name is Aksik, aka Annika, and today we are talking about backgrounds and textures created with regular water-based markers, aka felted pens, as we know them better maybe, and water, just plain water. Last time when I showed my finished pages for January, one of my viewers asked me to demonstrate how I created these backgrounds. One was this one, which is basically just 3 felt tip pens and water dropped into it. And another one was, oh, where is it? Here. This one, which is 2 colors of felt tip pens. This is blue, this is kind of a purplish. And I did that with pressing with wet tissue, and then let it dry, and I in between with this darker bits I accentuated the corners and those bits slightly with pencil. Other than that, it's pretty much just water and a felt tip pen. So how to do that? It is relatively, well, it is easy, but there's several things that you need to keep in mind. First thing is that it is definitely not suitable for most double-sided books. It will go through, you can see from here. The bright side of that is that because you are not manipulating the paper with a brush, you're not rubbing it, it won't damage the surface much, but it will buckle. Of course it will, you know, because you're getting the paper wet, the fibers are going to be stretching and relaxing unevenly, and the paper will buckle. Now, I have a couple of samples to show me and a couple of things I started to show you on camera how I finished. But first, what will you need? You will need water, of course, clean water, preferably in a tub you can get your hand into, because you will need to dip things into it and squeeze them out here. So you need to have fairly wide surface. It can't be a tiny little container. It will be awkward. Plus you need to rinse things often in between, so you don't just smear the pigment all over the page. I'll show you what I mean later. This is, you can maybe have a fancier one. It's a cheap pipette. They come like a couple of dollars, a couple of pounds per 10 or 20 on Temu or Amazon or anywhere. They're perfectly suitable for that job. It can be cloth, anything textile that has a bit of a texture on it. Sponges are really good to give different textures. My favorite is that sponge. These ones you often get in those artist sponges kits. They are more expensive than just buying regular sponges, but they do give much cooler effects. And of course you will need water-based markers. I'm not saying that this is all my water-based markers, but that's a fair bit of it. And the way I store them, the way I find it most convenient, is that I store them by kind of brands and colorways. I find I have figured out that this way I find them the easiest, and when I find them really painless to sort and figure out. So I have here connector pens, I have some Crayola colors of the world, I think, is it colors of the world? Yeah. I have, I think these are Stabilos. Yes, they have lovely colors, these ones. Some very odd tumbos. I don't have too many of these. They are a bit dear. Maybe in future sometimes. I do like them, but not so much to pay those prices. These are actually one of my absolute favorites. I wish they had more colors. They're called Stabilo Power, and I think maximum they have is 36 colors. Some mysterious reason they almost don't streak. Just naturally, without doing much anything on any halfway decent paper, they hardly leave any streaks. So they are great felt tip pens, and all of them, absolutely single one, plus Crayolas, which I have very few in other place. Stadler, felt tip pens, all of them work for it. It doesn't matter. As long as it's a water-based marker, it will work. Like I even have a couple of Spectrum Noir Aqua markers, tricolor. Yeah, tricolor markers, they work the same. Let's talk about paper. Different books have different paper, and water behaves in them in different ways. For example, art therapy books have decent, thick enough paper, but water spreads. There's no sizing almost, so water sinks very fast and also spreads because of that very fast. So you have to be careful while applying water, because, for example, like I'm going to show you with that image, you can see I did half of the image and I left half undone. And you can see that I was just learning this paper as I was doing this, and I went too close to the line art and it bled in. I don't mind because I can cover it up very easily with acrylic markers or acrylic paint or gouache, or even darker alcohol markers, or just cover some bits are I can cover over with pencils. So I don't really mind bleeds too much. But if it bothers you, you have to be careful and test on either page you don't like very much, or it needs to be near line art, because you need to have an idea how close you can go with water before it all bleeds into your image. And this image is done, basically there was 3 markers. They were actually, I by accident had them out. Most of them I put away already, but it was these 3 felt tip pens, and I just did kind of like bands of color like this, like stripes, to give this feeling of water moving and kind of color variations. And the colors, they were fairly random. Like, it was this cool blue because I thought, okay, they're kind of Nordic. I want the water to have some cool undertones as well. Kind of a bright sky blue, and this one is actually quite bright aqua color. So this is the combination of colors I used here, and this is the result after I have shown you. So how to do this one? You take that dropper or pipette or whatever you call it, you fill it with water, and you start kind of dabbing it. Oh, went too close already. You kind of have to, on this paper, keep away, like further from the line art than I was there. And if you feel that things are getting too wet, dab it with the cloth. This way they spread a little bit less as well. And I don't mind if the water spreads into Narwhal's sword or whatever you call it. What do you call it? Sword? Nose? No, it's not a nose. Because I'm probably going to do it with acrylic markers anyway. Oops, what I forgot to do here, and what I should keep telling you all the time to do is, good save. Always put paper between 2 pages. See, I do that more than I'd like to admit. See, I already can see that I'm going too close, because I had kind of forgotten how close I can go, because I didn't do it today. So you just keep dabbing it off the water. As long as it doesn't go into the skin tones much. It's a bit trickier to take off in skin tones, but in a wood like this or clothes, things can be easily covered. And I feel that I'm going too close again. Yesterday I was getting kind of better at judging it, but now I've lost the feel for it again. And you can see how there's still plenty of water left. You don't pour the water, you kind of dab it onto the paper, and you also keep taking it off so it wouldn't spread like mad. And this one is how it looks in the beginning, okay? It looks like it's very harsh and different from this. Once you let it stand and dry and develop, it becomes quite similar to what is there. This is not how the final result looks. This is how it looks in the beginning. So don't worry if there's kind of a, like this kind of weird ugly stage in the beginning. It'll change. It will become like this. That is why I wanted to have some parts of the page ready for you, so you can see how it eventually will look. Now, question is, if you want to accentuate those grooves, you take a pencil that is kind of similar to what color you want to stress or make stronger, and you find those slightly darker bits and you keep your pencil from the end like this, so you wouldn't press hard or put much pigment down, and you kind of put a tiny bit of pigment into these areas to kind of create stronger, or accentuate those interesting shapes. Here it's like the water, how it moved. It's supposed to look like light coming through moving water. As the previous book was on the paper where water spread really fast and almost mad, this book now has really good paper where sizing is good, and the water, I was sloppy here. This is why there's some paint on the figure, but if you can see, there's no actual bleeding. It didn't bleed into the image. As long as you keep your sponge clean, this is going to be fine. It's going to be clean in paper like this. So that's why you have to test. For example, here I tested it here, and once again I didn't sponge my clean properly in between, but you can see it didn't bleed anywhere. So if we want to try here, maybe you want to see how do I have anything marked here? Oh, I thought to do this disc behind her head in different greens. So I thought maybe this green. Should I go one kind of a brighter, lighter green as well? And something dull or duller. I'll take that one. So let's see. And we put them down almost scribbling. So it doesn't have to be tidy at all. You get more interesting results. Here the challenge will be not to get her hair too green, but even if I do get it, things can be covered, things can be fixed. And the background I want to probably do with acrylic or something fairly opaque anyway, so I don't really care if some color goes astray and goes onto it. Now we have the base sorted. And the next step is, which sponge are we going to use now here? let's use this one maybe. So we take the water tub, and I will usually do it off camera, but in the first one I'm going to show you. And always have a piece of paper ready so you can afterwards kind of dry your hand, the side of your hand, so you wouldn't drip onto the image, which I did yesterday when I was testing things. So you dip it in and you squeeze it so it would be wet but not dripping wet. It's hard to, like, you kind of have to feel it. So you get most of the water out. And now when you squeeze it like that, the water is not dropping anymore, yet it is wet. So putting that to the side, pressing the side of my hand so nothing would drip the page. And now, moment of truth, how will this sponge react? And you turn, so you wouldn't see you have dye or, you know, the ink on this side of the sponge. Don't use that anymore. You only use the side that is clean. So this side is still clean. I can use that one. And this side is still clean, so I can use that one. And now I have to wash the sponge, because otherwise I'm going to smear the ink all over the plates. So once again, clean part of the sponge, pressing it down, clean part of the sponge, pressing it down. Do I have any clean spots? Yes, I do. Clean part of the sponge, pressing it down. And now the paper is all wetted, and we just need to leave it to dry. So the colors would develop and still mingle. It will happen over a couple of hours. And I might show you at the end of the video maybe what the actual end result was, because at the moment it's still in the process. You don't see the result immediately. You see, you know, that it's wet, that things are happening, but it's a long process. It will take an hour, around an hour, to actually develop. So if you use that method, don't use heat gun or hair dryer to dry the background, because it needs to dry naturally. The colors need to mingle and mix naturally, otherwise the whole effect will be lost. This is now another book that has pretty decent paper for doing effects like this, and this is the first one I want to show. I kind of did half of the page so you can see, you know, what the end result will be, because as I said, it won't immediately happen. It will develop for a while, so you won't see how it looks like as soon as I'm done. So as you can see how I've scribbled, the top was exactly like the bottom. I've just scribbled. There's I think 2 or 3 greens, one very dark, one kind of a like sap green style of a green. I think there was 2 greens. There wasn't 3, there was just 2 greens, and I just scribbled them down and leaving some darker spots and some lighter spots. And then I took sponge to it, and I used this sponge now to give it like this texture. So once again, you wet the sponge. So wetting the sponge, and once again the squeeze. But it needs to be fairly wet but not dripping, because if it's dripping, there's no controlling it. But it does need to have some fair bit of water on it. Otherwise, there's nothing that will actually create the effect. And now you dry the side of your hand so you wouldn't drip onto your work. And then touch and lift. And you can see how it leaves a texture. And this paper, oops, who just talked about needing a paper underneath the pages, because I already forgot yesterday. So let's put it there. And once again, make sure that you're not using dirty bits of the sponge. Find a clean bit. And just dab. Clean bit, because if you use the dirty bit, you're just going to slam it, all that ink, onto the image, which has happened to me a couple of times. You can actually see here, like I went a bit sloppy and, you know, I wanted to go fast. That is a mistake if you do that. You can't rush very much. And now, once again, you can see the difference between the bottom and the top. It will develop and become similar or more similar to what is happening here at the top once the colors have had time to dry and mingle. So it usually will slightly lighten as well, because water, you know, wet paper looks dark or darker than dry paper. So basically why it looks darker is because it's still wet. Once the water evaporates, it will look lighter. But one thing that I wanted to show here I now of course have to deal with the wet paper. Okay, not a great idea. Is that you can also do some other cool stuff like this one. What I did here is that I just took three, in this case there was three different colors of felty pens, green, and I just scribbled, you know, some bits dark, some bits kind of mid-tone, some light bits at the top, and I went slightly out as well and dabbed the marker slightly out as if there was leaves there, and then I wetted kind of with the fairly wet. I wasn't even going for texture, I just wet it with a sponge and let it spread out. And now it truly looks, because the tree was looking kind of sketchy, the whole style of the image was sketchy, it does look like foliage. And then I did pretty much the same thing to the tree trunk. I think it's two colors of brown, that was it. Two brown Crayola colors of the world, two brown markers, that's it. And then I put some, you know, darker marker into, you know, kind of shadow areas. I put lighter marker into lighter areas. I even left some bits kind of white, so the water would just spread in there, and just dabbed with the wet sponge. I think it was this sponge, but it was fairly wet because I wanted good mingling of the ink. And that's what it looks like. And I kind of think about doing the whole image like that pretty much, you know, that would be fun. And if there is, like, I don't mind that spread here, because, you know, it's kind of supposed to be like there's still foliage over the house, you know, kind of leaves. I kind of made that on purpose. So I'd work around it. That's actually exactly what I wanted. So I think you get cool effects here with that. Now, this book is called The Lost Forest by Ghost Shrimp, and it doesn't exactly love water. As you can see, it spreads. I knew that going in. I had already tested the water here, but I didn't really care, because I'm going to do this with acrylic markers, and I'm going to cover this with metallic watercolor, all those dark blue bits that I put in with alcohol marker. But I wanted the background to be this blend of different dark pinks and the vermilion, red or orange. So what I did is, you can see here, you can see I left, you know, half of the page so you could see how the initial application, you know, what it looks like. You know, it looks anything but tidy, anything but organized, but you do have to put some kind of thought into it, you know, where you want the colors, what sort of a textures do you want. Do you want a smooth gradient or kind of more harsh blends? Oh, I'm taking a fairly wet sponge like this, and I just, and it will spread into the image, but in this case, I genuinely don't care. And I'm going to take the excess water off so it would dry faster. So this is done. And once, you know, I work it all over, all those bleeds are going to be invisible. But I also wanted to show you this one. I just put water-based marker onto this alien guy. And then I took this, it's a dishcloth, but it has kind of a like canvasy texture to it. So what I did is that I took a spray bottle and I put some water onto it. So it would be damp, not super wet, but damp. And then I pressed it onto this image, and you can see you get this cool kind of textured, almost scaly skin. And I thought, you know, that's a cool way to do this little alien. And my last book I'm gonna show you is this one. It's Karolina Kubikovska's On the Other Side of the Dream. It's one of my favorite coloring books. I love the paper, I love the art, everything about it is fantastic. Here you can see the difference how I did. Basically, I wanted these bits where those little dots are, I wanted those dots to be kind of like glowy bits in the air. So I did this. Most of it was done with a dark, kind of a like navy water-based marker. And then these are two colors. One is like aqua and one is like turquoise. In two colors. And then I just dabbed a lot of water into it so I would get them to blend. And once again, at first, when you first do it, I'm going to show it to you now. When you first do it, you won't see the result immediately. You get this very, very blended, very kind of a soft result only after it has so-called, what you call it, cured, when it has been sitting for a while. And you need to make it pretty wet for this kind of a blend to happen. So basically, this method of working, you need to be pretty bold with water. You need to realize that the bleeds, even if you try to avoid them, will occasionally happen. You can, once you get very experienced and know exactly the paper you're working on, you can mostly avoid them, but never 100%. Accidents will happen. You just need to work around them or be very relaxed about them. And it will go through. It will never be super safe. You know, if you just want to do a light texture without soaking the paper through like this, on let's say and Hannah Carlson books, the ones on the better paper like Moose or the Swedish editions, I'd say you'll be fine. You know, that's sort of a background. You need to do it today and then carry on with the page tomorrow. Or maybe you do a couple of that sort of a thing in a row. But I think you get cool results. So it's something a bit different, something to try out again. If it gets very buckly, some papers do, some papers don't. Once it's dry, you can put it between some other books or under some heavy books to keep for a couple of days. Or, you know, if you're really dedicated to it, you can pull out your iron and iron the page. But if you do iron a book page, then always put it between two sheets of paper when you're ironing it, so you wouldn't damage the surface. It's just easier to do. I've shown you at the moment as much as I can think of, there's many other ways you can use this method for creating texture. For example, you don't need to, let's say you don't have a sponge and you want to get those textured look. You need to just get a piece of kitchen paper. You crumple it up as messy as possible. Dip it in water. Squeeze it. So it needs to be, of course, halfway decent once it wouldn't fall apart immediately. Then you kind of get it into your hands and you crumple it up so you have this kind of a like uneven surface. And then you can tap it down and you get kind of similar or the same effects as you would with the natural sponge. So if you don't have fancy sponges, it won't stop you. You can still do with any piece of, wet cloth, same story. You can crumple it up, wet dishcloths, textured cloth, as I was showing you, that actually transfers its texture onto the paper. You can do so many things and use it for so many different purposes. But if you think about it, it's a really fun thing to kind of try out and play, because it's very unpredictable also. Like, don't expect it to be exactly what I get, or exactly the same as you did last time. Every paper reacts slightly differently. Some water-based markers dissolve faster and messier than other ones. You just need to experiment and have fun. Here the snake and the skull image is starting to develop a bit more. You can see how the bottom part is becoming more similar to the top part. And all of the images that I did today will eventually, the same thing will happen to them. So I hope you learned maybe something new today, or if not, at least had good or interesting time. Thank you very much for staying with me, and hopefully we'll chat like that and learn something new again very soon. Bye bye.